Imagine standing on a patch of earth where the laws of nature don't just feel different, they feel offended. We're taught that the world was created as a home for us, a garden intended for human breath and footsteps. But if you look closely at the ancient records, there are specific coordinates on this map that suggest the opposite. There are places on this planet where God didn't just leave, he slammed the door and turned the key, leaving behind a geographic scar that refuses to heal. These aren't just ruins or deserts, they are no-go zones, pockets of reality where the barrier between our world and something much older and much more territorial has worn dangerously thin. The most unsettling part isn't that these places are dangerous, but that their danger seems to have a memory. Take the Dead Sea, for instance. We're told the story of Sodom and Gomorrah as a moral fable about fire and brimstone, but we rarely talk about the physical aftermath that remains in the dirt. This isn't just a salty lake where you can float effortlessly. It is a chemical anomaly, a massive, stagnant grave where the water contains almost no oxygen and the air itself feels heavy with the weight of a permanent sentence. It's as if the earth there was commanded to stop producing life, to become a literal void right in the middle of a fertile region. But here's the problem. If it was just a natural disaster, the land would have recovered by now. Nature is aggressive. It reclaims everything. Yet for thousands of years, this specific basin has remained a biological blackout. When you dig into the Hebrew descriptions of these cursed lands, you find a word that doesn't just mean destroyed. It implies something closer to devoted to destruction, or a place that has been legally signed over to the void. This brings us to the strange, haunting reality of Mount Sinai. We think of it as a place of divine revelation, a holy mountain where the law was given. But if you read the actual account in Exodus, it reads more like a hazardous materials report. The mountain wasn't just sacred, it was radioactive with the presence of something that could shatter a human being just by proximity. God told Moses to set bounds around the mountain, a literal perimeter, and warned that if even an animal touched the base of it, it had to be killed from a distance. No, seriously, think about this. If the mountain was just a place of peace and light, why the perimeter? Why the threat of instant violent death for a wandering sheep? It suggests that Sinai wasn't just a meeting place, but a temporary tear in the fabric of the physical world. It became a zone where the physics of heaven and the physics of earth collided, and the result was so volatile that the ground itself became a weapon. Even after the glory departed, the tradition of the no-go zone remained. There are parts of that wilderness that locals still won't traverse at night, not because of bandits, but because the mountain still feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for a presence that hasn't fully let go of the stones. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. We assume these zones are limited to remote mountains or salty seas, but the biblical text hints at something far more systematic. There are mentions of the waste places, areas like the ruins of Babylon or Edom, which weren't just abandoned by people, they were officially rehomed to entities that don't belong in our daylight. The prophet Isaiah describes these places not as empty, but as being inhabited by the Seir, the shaggy ones or goat demons, and the Lilith, the night specter. It's a chilling thought that when a city is judged, it isn't just turned into a ghost town, it is handed over to a different kind of resident, a biological and spiritual lock that ensures humanity never returns. I've always wondered why we are so drawn to these places, despite the dread they inspire. Maybe it's because deep down we know that if a place can be locked, it means there is something on the other side of the door worth keeping away from us. Consider the Euphrates River. For years, it has been the bloodline of civilization, but the book of Revelation makes a terrifying claim that 4 specific angels are bound at the great river Euphrates, held in a state of suspended animation until a specific second of a specific day. If that's true, then the river isn't just a body of water, it's a lid. It's a geographic seal holding back a military force that predates our species. But the question we should be asking is, what happens when the seal starts to leak? As the Euphrates dries up in our modern era, people are finding caves and tunnels that haven't seen the sun in millennia. They find carvings that don't match any known civilization and echoes that don't seem to have an origin. It makes you realize that our no-go zones might not be permanent. A lock only works as long as the door stays shut, and we're living in a time when the hinges are starting to groan under a lot of pressure. It gets stranger when you look at the Valley of Siddim, another area associated with the abyss. Ancient texts suggest that this wasn't just a place of battle, but a place where the earth itself opened up, not in a geological sense, but in a way that allowed something from the below to influence the above. These areas were often marked by slime pits or bitumen seeps, as if the very blood of the underworld was leaking through the cracks. It gives a whole new meaning to the idea of a cursed land. It's not just bad luck, it's a localized collapse of the barrier that keeps the monsters in the basement. Now, you might think this is all ancient superstition, a way for primitive people to explain away harsh environments. But here is the twist that reframes everything. Modern science has its own version of no-go zones. We have areas of the ocean where the magnetic fields go haywire, and we have dead zones where nothing can survive. But more importantly, we have nuclear waste sites that we are currently marking with keep out signs designed to last 10,000 years. We are using jagged spikes, terrifying architecture, and universal symbols of dread to warn future generations that the ground beneath them is devoted to destruction. When you look at the way God cordoned off Sinai or erased Sodom, it looks exactly like what we're doing with our radioactive waste. He wasn't just punishing a city, he was containing a fallout. If the sin of these places was a breach of the natural order, perhaps an interaction with the Nephilim or a forbidden technology of the spirit, then the curse was actually a quarantine. The fire and brimstone wasn't just a hot fire, it was a cosmic cleansing agent used to seal a leak that could have infected the rest of the world. The Dead Sea isn't a monument to God's anger, it's a lead-lined casket for something we aren't supposed to touch. So, when we read about the gates of hell or the bottomless pit, we shouldn't think of them as metaphorical states of being. We should look at the map. We should look at the places where the birds won't fly and the trees won't grow. There are coordinates on this earth that serve as the bolts on the floorboards of our reality. They are there for our protection, keeping us away from the things that were locked up before we even learned how to walk upright. The unsettling truth is that we are currently expanding our own no-go zones. As we strip mine the earth and explore the deep places, we're stumbling onto the old markers. We're finding the boundaries that Moses set and the pits that the residents of the plain fell into. We like to think we're the masters of this world, but we're really just tenants living in a house with several rooms that have been boarded up for a reason. And lately, it feels like someone or something is knocking on the other side of those boards. We're left with a lingering uncertainty that no map can resolve. If these places are locks, who holds the key? And if the key is ever turned, will we even recognize the world that is unleashed? The Bible ends with the promise of a new earth, a place where there is no more sea and no more curse. It implies that the current earth is so riddled with these no-go zones, so full of ancient prisons and radioactive scars, that the only way to truly fix it is to start over from scratch. Until then, we stay on the path, we watch the borders, and we pray that the things God decided to bury stay buried.